Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My paper presenting here is theoretical by nature, so you are not going to see fancy pictures. Instead, you will see like simple equations. But I really wish you can view them also as pictures, right? It's actually they're beautiful. Yeah. So in this paper, I'm going to address a fundamental question in asset pricing and macroeconomics. What is the question? The question is, how does uncertainty affect asset prices and macroeconomic dynamics such as investment? Before answering the question, let me give you a very rough but intuitive definition of uncertainty here. Here by uncertainty, I mean the blurriness or the randomness of firm-specific economic prospects. In the literature, it is called macro uncertainty. Just for example, it is being studied in Bloom 2009 econometric paper. Let me be crystal clear. What do I mean by uncertainty here? Actually, it's just the volatility of idiosyncratic shocks. Okay, so it is different from several other concepts floating in the literature. One is the nighting uncertainty, which is unknown unknowns. It's very different from this concept. It's also very different from macro uncertainty, which is basically the volatility of aggregate shocks. So here, what I'm talking about by uncertainty is the volatility of idiosyncratic shocks, which is firm-specific, basically. Okay, for the rest of the talk, I will first describe the mean contribution of the paper and the mean result of the paper. And after that, I will lead you through the model, okay, the theoretical setup and the key mechanisms of the model. And after that, I will provide some of the empirical findings to support the theory. In the end, I will conclude. So as a mean contribution in this paper, I developed a general equilibrium model with heterogeneous firms and heterogeneous agents with financial friction. And this model shows that the impact of uncertainty shocks actually depends on two important factors which has been missing in the literature. What are the two factors? One is the degree of risk sharing in the economy, and the second is the source of uncertainty. It really matters where does this uncertainty come from, where the source or origin of the uncertainty. Let me go through one by one. So for the degree of risk sharing in the economy, empirically you can think it can be captured or measured by the condition of the financial sector in the economy. And the condition of the financial sector fluctuates over time dramatically. It can be very good, as in the 90s, and it can be very poor, like financial crisis, the tough period where we have experienced lately, like in the late 2000s. And as for the source of uncertainty, here I focus on two major sources of uncertainty shocks. One is about the investment opportunities in the near future. It's like, for example, for IT firm, I'm really concerned feel uncertain about for the next year, how profitable for my investment, for my projects. And the other is uncertainty about short-term cash flows. It's more about if you have line of production, you're a manufacturer, you really cares, you feel uncertain about next year or next quarter, how many shoes or how many clothes you're going to sell. Okay, so there are very different types of uncertainty. Let's call the first type growth uncertainty, or more technically just investment uncertainty. And let's call the second one cash flow uncertainty, or more technically, the productivity uncertainty. In this talk, I will stick to this. I will use the more technical terms, investment uncertainty and the productivity uncertainty. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. More specifically, on the asset pricing side, what are the main results in the paper? The implications I'm going to discuss is for the productivity uncertainty, it always has a negative risk premium, which means you may not be familiar with the term risk premium. You just think is the productivity uncertainty is always bad in terms, for the investors. They don't like this kind of uncertainty. No matter the risk sharing condition in the economy is good or bad, On average, it's also bad. So usually people just don't like this uncertainty about cash flows. It's very intuitive. And for the second type of uncertainty, which is actually new in this paper, is investment uncertainty. It can have a positive or negative risk premium depending on the risk sharing condition, whether the risk sharing condition is good or poor. Okay, so it's kind of flip side, which means if the financial sector is strong, let's say in the 90s, the uncertainty actually, the investment uncertainty can be good. Investors like it. Okay, but for example, if we go back to the late 2000s, when the risk sharing condition in the economy or financial sector is fragile, if the investment uncertainty goes large, all investors feel really bad. So this is the intuition here. I'll show this in the model. And what are the macroeconomics implications? Basically, these two sources of uncertainties can help us to solve two important puzzles in macroeconomics. One is why uncertainty. Sometimes uncertainty can boost aggregate investment. Sometimes uncertainty can decrease the aggregate investment. Here, in my theory, it's very intuitive actually, because there are two sources of uncertainties. Each one take a different role. Productive uncertainty always has a negative effect on the aggregate investment. And however, the investment uncertainty always has a positive effect on the aggregate investment. Another puzzle has been recently documented in the AER paper by Beckman and Baer. The puzzle is, if you look at this cross-section of firms, okay, you measure their firm-level investment rates, and then you see their dispersions. So this dispersion of investment rates is really strongly counter-cyclical. It's pro-cyclical. And this pattern is very robust across countries, like in US data, in UK data, in German data. However, at the same time, if you look at in the cross-section of firms, look at their sales growth, the dispersion, okay? The dispersion is counter-cyclical. So how to reconcile these two dynamics in one model has been challenging. So in my theory, it's actually very intuitive, very natural, because the productivity uncertainty is a main driver. I show the productivity uncertainty actually is a main driver for the sales dispersion. Well, the investment uncertainty actually the main driver for the investment dispersion. And the different impact of these two uncertainty shocks gives these two different dynamics. Each of those, I want to stress, each of the implications can set my model apart from the existing asset pricing and macroeconomics models, and all those implications in the paper. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them in today's talk, but in my paper I show they can be supported by the data. Now let me take you into the model briefly. So the model is general equilibrium model. Is actually for the production. Each firm is pretty standard. This is the formula I was talking about. So basically, the firms produce consumption goods using labor and physical assets. It's like machines. And here, the A is productivity shock, and the productivity shock here is stochastic. Okay, it is subject to two shocks. One is aggregate productivity shock, the other is idiosyncratic productivity shock. And this idiosyncratic part is a key part here in my paper. That's why I put it in the blue color. The volatility of this part is what I call the productivity uncertainty. Okay. And the assets in place, the machines managed by the firm actually depreciate over time. It's constant rate, but at the same time, the firms can make new investment, create new machines to make them to replace the old ones. So this is the new machines, KFT new, created by the firm by doing investment. And this DM is just the firms in my model, in my theory, as in the data. The firms, they don't make investment continuously. They need some investment ideas or opportunities. And here is captured. The ideas, the randomness of the ideas is captured by the investment opportunity here, the DMFT. To summarize, actually, the investment is at firm level is very lumpy. Most time is zero, sometimes jump up. And it's to make investment, actually you need this growth options, which is SFT here. And also you need to purchase some raw materials like steel and this type of raw materials to make new machines. At the same time, here's another shock. I do firm-specific shock. I call it investment quality shock. Okay, so which means when you make investment, how profitable your investment is also random. You have this uncertainty, and the volatility of this shock is what I call investment uncertainty. So this is two types of uncertainty associated with one associated with production process. The other investment uncertainty is associated with the investment process. So who are the guys in the economy supplies those raw materials to close the economy? In my model, there's a representative investment goods firm, like the mining firm, or they produce those raw materials. And in my model, there are agents that can be households or experts. Households like me, we just consume, provide labor, but experts, they are insiders of the firm, and they're managers or key investors. And the managers in the firm, they are subject to financial frictions. Okay, basically they have moral hazard problem. They can steal from the firm. So as a optimal contract, they have to keep a fixed chunk of the equity in the firm. Okay, they have to hold some of the stock, for example. Okay, so they exposed to the idiosyncratic risk of the firm. So this is a one graph, to show the economy. Let's, for the sake of time, let's go over it. The broad intuition is when this uncertainty goes up, productivity uncertainty goes up, because the insiders are subject to this non-diversified firm-specific shocks, so they become effectively risk-averse, so they want to decrease investment. And for investment uncertainty, when this uncertainty goes up, because the investment is exercising all growth options, it has convexity, so the aggregate investment goes up. I call it the convexity effect. However, at the same time, it bears the same risk effect as before. So there are two countervailing forces offsetting each other. So that's why you have this sign change for the impact on uncertainty. This is the main intuition here. This because those guys, which one dominates which depends on the state of the financial condition of the economy. Let me conclude. Okay, here. So overall, the paper shows that the impact of uncertainty shocks really depends on two factors. One is the source of uncertainty. The other is the degree of risk sharing. You have to take these two factors into account when you try to study the impact of uncertainty shocks. And in my paper, I provide a new uncertainty-based asset pricing theory. It can explain the asset pricing puzzles and the macroeconomics puzzles at the same time. And in the end, there is in the model also provide a fundamental mechanism and cover the conditions under which the uncertainty can boost or suppress aggregate investment. Uncertainty can carry a positive negative risk premium. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's.